In our last videos, we focused on creating our floor plan and our foundation plan. And in this video, I'm going to look at creating my elevation views for my building. So the two required elevations for this project are going to be the south elevation and the east elevation. I'll walk you through creating the south one and getting started on the east one. But again, I'm going to slowly, as we go through these videos, start taking some training wheels off a little bit. So that this way, when you submit your work, I know that you are pretty competent within the software and understanding how these drawings kind of come together. One thing that I want to make note of before we get started with AutoCAD is something that I see students mess up with in the elevations pretty often. So the building itself, again, is going to be 24 feet wide, and then in this direction would be 18 foot wide in total. This part of the building is 12 foot, and then with that 6 foot extension is 18. Those measurements are coming from the face of studs, and the elevation is showing us finish to finish on either side. So if I was looking at the south elevation, I need to make sure that I'm drawing the elevation with the fact that we are going to have a half an inch out for that plywood sheathing, and then 3/4 inch out for that siding on both sides of this. That 24 feet, and we can especially see it if I zoom in here on the section view, is going to be just from where the foundation sits to where that stud wall sits. That's where the 24 feet is. So we need to make sure we're expanding outwards on either side. I get a lot of the elevation submissions where the whole building is 24 feet, and then technically the elevation has been drawn too small. Our 24-foot measurement is coming from right here. So from here to here is 24 feet. So we can kind of start from there and then expand out, which is how I would probably approach this drawing to make it a little bit easier for myself of where exactly parts or pieces are sitting. I also would recommend, so now we're back into the file that we left off in the last video, is I'm going to draw my elevation sitting directly underneath here of my floor plan, because I really do like that alignment. I find it makes it a lot easier to understand coordinations of drawings. So I'm going to switch myself over to my def point layer, my layer that doesn't print, just so I can kind of draw a guideline down from here of where I'm going to start my elevation view. So I'm going to do line, L, enter. I'm going to zoom in, just start it from that corner, and I'm just going to go super far down. I'm not measuring how far I'm making it, just going far. I'll click again to place another point, and then I'll hit escape to cancel it. I could take this line here, this one that I just drew as a reference, and delete it, but again, since it's in the def point layer, I won't have to delete it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use this line essentially that I drew across here, and I'm going to just use it as a reference for where my ground sits. So I'm going to build this building quite literally from the ground up. So I'm going to click on this ground line. I'm going to click on the grip and just expand it out. Click on the grip again and expand it out. I probably have made it too long for the time being, but I'll make it shorter later. And I'm going to switch it to the A-line 1 layer, the ground layer. Next, I'll switch myself over to line 3, the medium layer, and I'm going to go back into the line tool, L, enter, and I'm going to draw a line from where the ground and this reference intersect, and I'm going to go up 6 inches, and then I'm going to go over to the left in this case, 1 1/4. Or 1.25. If I wanted to type it as a fraction, I could do 1-1/4. This is going to be the end point of that siding that's going to be out, because again, we have that 1/2 inch plywood, 3/4 inch sheet siding. And then I'm going to do another one over here on this side, line, enter. From that point, up 6 over 1 1/4 as just kind of my references to where kind of everything's going to be starting. The reason why I went up 6 is that if we look at our instructions for, oops, hold on, let me reorient myself here. So we have this little area here from finished grade up, and we can see this is representing again our foundation wall. And from the instructions, we see that the finished grade line is 6 inches below the top of the CMU foundation wall. So what I've just done is a little bit of line work here, and then, whoops, I have this just opened in 2 spots, because what I want to do is look at my layer work. We can see that this is the green outline layer of our building, and we have this blue layer, this kind of medium, or this light medium line-ish, or medium heavy, depending on how you want to define it, as our kind of where the top of the foundation wall sits. What I could do a bunch of different things with it actually in here. If I go back into AutoCAD, is what I would typically do rather with how I have everything set up is I would go into my line 4, the light medium, and I would draw a line just across from here to here. If I had drawn it all as one line though, so I hit escape to end the command, I'll hit enter to go back into it. If I had just a line that went all the way across here, and I wanted to make it into 2 different layers, I do have the ability to switch parts of it out by using the break command. So if I use the command break and I select for break at point, I can select the line I want to break by clicking on it and the point I want to break it at, which would be that piece, and then this is now its own separate line compared to this one. So I do have that ability and function, but I don't need to do that because what I did instead was just draw out the 1 1/4. So this is the bottom of our floor structure or the top of our foundation, depending on how you want to think about it. And then what we're going to need to do is go up for our floor itself. So our floor is 8 inches in total width. We aren't going to have to, in the elevation view, show the different details of the floor. So we're just going to go up 8 inches from this line that we've already drawn. Now, we could do that by using the offset tool, or we could also go into the line tool, go from this point up 8, and bring a line all the way across. And if I want to bring it all the way across, I can hover over that point without clicking, and I can see where exactly the 2 of them would meet. This line here for the top of our floor needs to be in the layer. It needs to be a magenta line that is also hidden. We don't have a layer for that. I do have a magenta layer, so I do have this light layer. And then what I'll have to do is come here to my property overrides. I could also change it here in my properties bar. I can change its line type to hidden directly over there. This line is technically in the wrong layer, but also I just would prefer to have this all be one consistent height. So I'm going to actually just delete it and just redraw that line all as one piece. Next, we'll add in the top of our walls on this side. So again, if I look at my drawings from the file provided, I can look at them in the PDF, that the top of the wall is 8 foot 1 1/2 up from the top of the floor. So all of the measurements are coming off of this magenta line here. So again, I'm just going to draw a guide up 8 foot 1 1/2, or I could also use offset to figure out where this top of wall is going to be sitting. So I'll go into AutoCAD. I'll use the offset tool for it. So I'll do O, enter. For my distance, I'll leave it set as through, enter. I'll click on this line and I'm going to go up 1 foot, 1.5, because I don't have to put anything else in here to represent that this is 8 foot, 1.5. If I put a designator mark for inches, I could, but I don't need to. So I'm just going to do 1.5 foot, and that will tell me where the top of this sits. And then I'm going to go in with my medium line, my green one, and I'm going to draw a line from here straight up. I'll do the same thing on this side. I'll go back into the line tool, L, enter, from here straight up. Next, I need to figure out what my roof slope is going to be. So there are a couple ways I could go about doing it. The easiest way I find to do a roof slope is I can do it in the depth point layer. I'll stay here in my medium one, is I'm going to draw a line from this endpoint. I'm going to go up 3 foot over 12 foot, enter. I'm going to go up 3 foot, enter, over 12 foot, enter. And I could go up more since technically I don't meet here because the building is a little bit larger than the 24 feet. So I could just do another 3 foot over 12 foot. And then I'm just going to come and connect the dots. What I could have also done instead of doing another up 3 over 12, so if I do Control Z to undo that, if I go into my line tool, really all I need is up 3 foot over 12 foot. I can connect those dots, and then I could hit escape to end the command, and I could use the extend tool, EX, to figure out where this is going to meet here, and then I can hit escape. I can click on this grip to bring it really far up, further than I need, hit escape, and I could even click on this line, and as long as I'm getting that polar tracking, that green dashed line, I can figure out where the two of those would meet. If I do, let me Control Z again, if I do a line and I go up 3 foot over 12 foot, up 3 foot over 12 foot, that's 2, and then another up 3 foot over 12 foot, and connect them, then all I have to do is use the trim tool to cut this down once I get this line up to meet it. And even right now, though, I probably wouldn't trim it, and I'm going to explain why in just one moment. So I'm going to delete these lines that I used to help me get my up 3 over 12, and where I'm currently sitting is this blue line. So now I need to offset it up for the thickness of my roof. And if we look back into our instructions, our roof itself is, and I don't like how that's over there, there we go. Our roof itself is 9.25 inches thick. So I'm going to go into AutoCAD and I'm going to offset, leave it through, so I'll hit enter, this roof up 9.25. The reason why I didn't want to trim it just yet is because then I wouldn't be able to bring this line up to meet the actual height, this line up to meet that height, and then I can use my trim tool, TR, enter, cut that little bit off, cut, hit escape, and then I'm going to click on this bottom part of my roof and I'm going to change it to the A line 4, the blue layer. I almost put it in title block by accident. So now I've got the basis of my elevation view constructed, and I'm ready to start adding in where the rough openings of the windows are going to go. I like to do this again in the depth point layer whenever I'm kind of detailing out where openings and cuts are going to go, so that this way, if I forget to delete lines afterwards, I'm not at a total loss. A benefit too of having my elevation directly underneath my floor plan is that I can do this. So in my depth point layer, I can go into the line tool and I can just draw a line straight from the edge of this window, and I could just project it straight down. And so I can do another line here, L, enter, from the edge of this window, straight down. I could also do these as construction lines, but essentially, without me having to measure anything out, think back to our orthographics when we were projecting the top. Without having to measure anything, I'm able to just figure out exactly where these windows go. I had that 6-inch spacer, as you can see there in my dynamic input box. I won't have to measure anything related to my porch. I absolutely could have taken a measurement. So what I could have done was I could have gone into the line tool, and from the face of my stud, which again would be here, I could have gone in 6 foot, and then I could have gone over 3 inches, and that would have gotten me in the exact same spot. But I find just kind of projecting them straight down from my view is a little bit easier. I'll do the same thing with my door, and then I'll delete everything and I'll add in the porch after I do the door. So I'll do a line from this door straight down. And I could also do it as a ray. So if I do ray, enter, I could click on this door and say I want to go straight down. What a ray is going to do is an infinite line, but unlike construction line, it's only just going to do it from a singular point, so it's not going up for it. And then I'm also going to figure out or measure out where my sill is going to be for my windows and where my header is going to be for my doors. So I'm going to draw in my depth point layer still a line from the top of the floor up 2 foot, enter, and I'll just go straight across that window bank because the sill is only going to affect those 2 windows. And I'll hit escape to end the command, and I'll do another line from that point at the top of the floor up 6 foot 8, enter. This one I will bring all the way across because it'll help me figure out the rough opening for my door. And now I have a place to put my windows. So in the template file, there's this window block here for a window and elevation. Keep in mind the rough opening is referring to this blue one here. So when I click on this window to copy it, I'm going to do copy up here, or keyboard shortcut CO. I'm going to grab mine by one of these interior blue corners. Doesn't matter which one. If I do it by that bottom corner, what I need to make sure I do is place it in this bottom corner. So I'm going to copy one here. I'm going to copy another window right here. After I have my windows in place, I'll hit escape to end the window. And I'm just going to take these guidelines and delete them. Do I need to technically delete all those window guides? No, because they were in the depth point layer, but looks like there's one sitting, yep, there was one sitting underneath it too. Any depth point line can stay, but it's more so I like to delete them because I find it just a little overbearing when I'm looking at it. Within this window block, we do have a little bit of a snag in the fact that we have this ugly trim overline here. The problem is I can't use the trim tool necessarily to delete this because these are blocks. So what I am going to have to do is click on it and use the explode tool, which is X, enter, I could do both of them at the same time, but I'll do them separately. X, enter. And now they're no longer blocks. Now they're separate individual things. And so now I can go into the trim tool and I could cut all of this line work out. So that way it just has that spacer in between instead of that weird, ugly overlap. I can also kind of like trim out some of these, which whoops, since it wasn't on screen, it deleted the entire thing, which is kind of annoying. Sometimes trim does that. So I just did Control Z. I'll click on here. I'll trim out this part. Essentially, I'm just leaving for the time being a rough opening for a door because I don't have a door as a block that I can load in. I'll hit Escape to end the trim command. I'll take these two def point lines and I'll delete them as well. I'll delete that one as well. I don't like leaving too many of them around. I know it's weird, but it's what I do. And then I'll use my def point layer to also start framing out where my porch is gonna go. So I'll do these as rays again because it makes it a little easier. So ray, enter, from this point, straight down, escape, enter to get back into the last command I ever used. From this point, straight down, escape. This way I don't have to measure where this box for my porch is going. I can just easily come into my layers, go into my yellow one, A-line 2, and I'll just draw a rectangle from that intersection point to that point. And I hit escape a bunch of times to end the command, and then I'll click on these two rays that I used and delete them. I'm also going to want to trim this part of the bottom of the wall away. So I'll go TR, enter, and I'll trim that part away. And what I need to do now in the porch is detail out where each one of those steps are going. So we have the stoop itself and the steps. And the porch, if we go into the dimension tool, and I just make a quick dimension here, this porch itself is 1 foot 2 inches tall, or 14 inches. I need to split that 14 inches up into 3 even spots, or as even as possible, because we're going to find out when we break out our calculator that 14 divided by 3 is not an even number. So we're going to make each step about 4.5 or 4.6 inches in height for it. So I can't use offset necessarily because this is a full rectangle or a full polyline. So I'll either have to explode it or put myself into the medium layer, line 3, the green one, and draw a line up 4.6, enter, straight across, up 4.6, enter, straight across, hit escape, and then I'm just going to want to always try to remember to click on any lines, especially if I don't do them in the def point layer, to delete them. In this scenario, and I'll delete this measurement here too, in this scenario, a green line hiding on a yellow line wouldn't matter because the yellow line is going to print out heavier than the green one. But if I had like a red line hiding behind this blue one, it would be a really big problem because all of a sudden I'm going to get this really heavy line sitting underneath there. I am going to leave my door in this case as just this rough opening because I do want you to use find some CAD blocks or create your own door. Keep in mind the trim too. And one thing we could do to make the trim easier is if I do a join and I select all of these lines, enter, or I could, if I just did Control Z to undo it, I could select all the lines beforehand, J, enter. They're all in that one piece. I can do an offset, O, enter. I like leaving it as through, enter. I'll click on my door, and my frame trim should be 3.5 inches. So I can do that to kind of put some trim in here before putting a door in. And then before, I know last video I kept saying I think I'm done, but I always kept finding different things to do. But my last thing then that I would need to start adding, of course I still have annotations and stuff to do, would be my hatch. So if we look at our instructions for our elevation view, for our hatch, our vertical siding hatch is to be type line with an angle of 90 and a scale of 48. So I'm going to go into my hatch pattern layer, and I'm going to start the hatch tool, keyword shortcut H, enter, and I'm going to use the pattern line with a scale of 48. I'm going to leave the angle set as 0 to show you that if you click your hatch beforehand, so I got to put it up in here, here, as well as here and here. And then I realize I didn't do it at the right angle. I can change it after the fact. So I can come here and click on angle and say 90, enter, and it'll adjust it while the command's still active. Even if you've picked the wrong pattern and you want to go back and change it, you can. Once I hit escape to end the command, this hatch is still an active hatch. So if I click on it afterwards, I can change its scale, its angle, I can change the layer it's in, I can change its pattern too. So if I wanted it in a different pattern, I could do a bunch of different changes. So nothing with a hatch is really permanent unless, and I don't recommend you do this in this project, but unless you explode it. So if I click on this hatch and I do X, enter, now it's no longer a hatch. Now these are all separate lines, but I'm going to control Z to undo that because I do want to just keep it remaining as a hatch itself. Okay, for our next elevation, I'm going to take a lot of what I already have existing in this one and again in my floor plan and use it to kind of help build out my second elevation, my east one, over here on the side. So what I'm actually going to do is take my whole floor plan here by highlighting all of it, and I'm going to make a copy of it using the copy tool, which is CO, or after I've selected it, I can right click and say copy selection, and I'm just going to make a copy of it over somewhere over here. Doesn't really matter where right for now. And hit escape, and then I'm going to rotate it so that way I can borrow again a lot of the dimensions. So I'm going to highlight my building again, or my copy of my building. I'm going to right click, rotate. For my base point, it's not going to matter too much in this scenario, but I'll just click on like a corner, and then I'm just going to rotate it 90 degrees. So I'm just going to move it like this and then click. What this is going to allow me to do is, again, trace some of those rays out so that this way I don't have to measure anything out too much. So I'll do some rays from this view here, again, to kind of just stop me from having to measure, and I can use some guidelines to build out my east elevation. So I'm going to switch my layer to Anno Def, so that way I'm in the no printing def point layer, and I'm going to draw a ray, enter, one from the very tippy top, straight over, escape to end the command, enter to get right back in, or enter to end the command too. Another one from down here, enter to end the command, enter to get back in. Another one from my ceiling height, enter, end it, enter to get back in. Another from my, or you know what, I'll do the windows afterwards. I don't want to overcomplicate it. Another one from, so I did enter to get back in the command. From my top of floor, enter to end it, enter to get back in. Another one from my bottom of floor, enter to end it, enter to get back in. And I'll do another one from my ground, enter to end it. Then from my building here, I'll do enter to get back into the ray command since it was the last one I used, or I could type in ray from my very side, enter to get back in, click to place, enter to end it, enter to get back in, from up here, enter to end it. So I have built in here my east elevation. I have a lot of it already in here, and I'm going to use the trim tool, TR, enter, to get rid of a lot of that, get rid of a lot of that, get rid of a lot of that, get rid of a lot of that. Keep in mind when we do trims, there could be, so for instance, there was a little depth point line that got hidden back here. It's one of the reasons why I really like doing this step in depth point, is so that way this line that got trimmed and left behind here, I can click on it and I can delete it, but if it did ultimately get left there, it's okay. It's not going to have any effect on my building or my drawing, which is really nice. So now I've got a little bit of kind of like cleanup work to do to make this into my drawing here, but not really all too much, which is fantastic. So I'm going to just shorten this line down to here for now. That's not where this line ends, but that's where I'll shorten it to. I'll switch some of my layers and things around, so I know that these three are going to be in my green layer, my medium. This one is going to be in my blue layer, my light medium. So is this guy, or actually no, this guy is going to be a light line that I want to do a property override of to make hidden. So is this one for my ceiling height. I'll switch it to the light line and I'll make it hidden. And this is going to be a blue line, line 4, and this is going to be my ground because I took it off of the ground here. And I need to extend it out. I'm not entirely done with everything because I still need to clean some things up. I need to bring in my 1.25 inches for my foundation over here. And I also need to bring in 1.25 inches over here because of the way the building kind of works is I have, again, this little extended porch. So I'm going to need to do some breaking and moving. But I still have, again, I didn't have to take a lot of measurements to get my overall building kind of in order, which is pretty nice. So I'm going to switch myself to my green layer, my line 3. I'm going to draw a line from here in 1.25, enter, and I'll go straight down. I'll hit escape to end the command. I'll click on this guide that I used and bring that one straight up. And then I'll click on this blue line here and I'll bring it over there. Again, these two could have sat directly on top of each other. It wouldn't be the end of the world, but it's always kind of just best case scenario to not have lines that overlap, because what's going to happen if I go to print it and, a line, there is, maybe a red one or a yellow one hiding behind here. That would pose a problem for us. Same thing here is I'm going to bring this also in 1.25 inches. So I'm going to go back into the line tool, L, enter, over here, 1.25 inches, and I'll bring that straight down. And then I'll take this line and bring it up. I'll take this line here and bring it over, which actually I want to bring it over to there. And I'm going to take this, and I believe I want to switch it to green. Let me just double check. Yes, sir, I do. And actually, I'm going to have some changes in line, so we'll do a break there for that one, where kind of that porch is. I'm going to switch this one to a green. I want, for the porch itself is also going to be that 8 inches, but we do have a little bit of variance, so I have this as a blue line and this as a green one. So what I could do is I could take this line here, bring it up, hit escape, go into my line tool, go into my blue layer, line, enter, and draw a line there to attach it. This would get me the same end result as if I Control Z to undo, and I bring this line back if I use that break at point. So if I do break at point, I can select this line and I can select here to break it. And what it's done is it made this is one line and this is another one. So I can have two different lines that I use here. For the remainder then of our porch, we're just going to build this out to our edge of our building. So I'm going to stay in the green layer. I'll do a line. I could have also extended this little buddy here. And then I could also, with this, shorten this down, draw a new green line here, or I could, if I do Control Z, I could use that same break at point, click on this line, click on that point, and now I can switch this to be a different line. One thing too, though, so this is kind of a good scenario, or a good learning moment at least, of I switched it, but since there's an override, that override still carried with it. So I've got to come over here and switch it back to by layer, so that way it will remain in the correct layer. Next up is I can add in kind of where my window is going to be going, or this porch line here, this ceiling for the porch does, oh, I hate when it does this, does carry over, and then we have a little bit down for the porch itself. I want to do the window and the porch first before we kind of dive into that. So I'll go for my window, similar to the same way I did kind of everything else with my building, is I'm going to switch myself over to depth point, and I'm going to use array. So array, enter, click to start from this point, click the direction I want to go, enter to end it, enter to get back in, click on the point I want to go from, direction I want to go, enter to end it. And so now I have the rough opening for this window, and I can even borrow the rough openings from here. So I'll do enter to go back into array. I have my sill height, enter to end it, enter to get back in, and I have that header height. So I can use those to just kind of give me my rough opening for where that window sits on the east side. And then I'll come over here to my CAD block, and I can copy this one in here. If I didn't want to just do a copy with the copy tool, if I wanted to insert it in as a specific block, I could come up here to insert and scroll down, and I have a window and elevation. One thing of mind is notice that my cursor is locking it into that upper left corner. So that's what I want to place it based on, of that corner. And then I'm just going to highlight these rays and delete them because I don't need them anymore. And I also am going to do my porch. So I'm going to take this ground line and I'm going to extend it out a little bit. And I am going to use rays for my porch. So I'll hit escape to unselect that. I'll do array, enter, or excuse me, ray, I just typed in R, enter, ray, enter, and I'll do from here, enter, enter, from here, enter, enter, from here, enter, enter. I can also do, to figure out my toe height and that slant, but this might look a little confusing when we do it. And I can do raise from over in this direction, so enter to start the command, enter to end it, enter to start it, enter to end it, enter to start it, click the direction you want to go, enter to end it. And essentially, this has made me a little grid of where my steps are coming and going. So let's make sure I can do my toe height and stuff correctly. In this view, because our steps are a little bit closer to us, the viewer, the steps are drawn blue. If you do the optional west view, you'll see they're magenta. So this way they would print lighter, because if we're looking at the west side of the building, the steps are quite a bit further away from what we're looking at. So I'm going to switch myself over to my blue layer, and I'm going to start drawing a polyline, or I could just do this with the regular line tool. And I've got one step going up, over 1 foot, going up, over 1 foot, going up, and then straight over to the building itself, hit escape, and then I can take all of these def point lines and delete them, and I have this stair. Maybe I made that seem a little bit more simple than it actually is, because that is like a lot of grid to look at. And but again, you can rewind me and pause me, which is kind of one of the benefits of these videos. Next, before we put in things or start relating to our privacy wall, we're just going to have to put in that little bit of ceiling height that sits on the bathroom. So the ceiling, we can see that ceiling height a little bit more in this section view. Again, this one's optional. So it's a 1/2 inch piece of gypsum wallboard, and then it's our 2x6. The way we detail how far down that ceiling is going to go is it's 7.5 down. So I could do it in the def point layer. I'm just going to switch myself to the medium one and draw a line from this point down 7.5, and then go straight across, hit escape to end it, delete that little line that I made, and then shorten that line down. So this way it's all just one piece. And then I am ready to add in my hatch for the building as well. So this hatch is going to follow the exact same pattern that this hatch followed. And so for that, I'm going to switch myself over to the pat layer. But let's say, for fun, I didn't. Let's say I kept myself in this medium one, and I started the hatch tool. Hatch recognized the last time I used it, I used line. It recognized the angle and the scale, so I don't have to change anything. But I go to hatch these 3 areas, and I realize, oh no, I'm in the wrong layer. I don't have to stop and start completely anew. Instead, what I can do is just come here to the word properties, and I can switch my layer over to pat. So I don't have to completely just start fresh and delete everything that I did. I can still just use what I have. Lastly, then, for the privacy screen part, I'll get you started with it, but I'm not going to give you every single detail of it, sort of like with this door here. For with this privacy screen, I'm going to use, you guessed it, my def point layer, an array, R-A-Y, enter, just to give me kind of where these are going to sit. So that's going to show me where this piece is for my pole that's holding that up. Line, and I'll just draw a line on top of this rather than trimming it. And the reason why I'm doing that is because when I hit escape, then it'll be easier just to delete this. And then there's also another 2x8, or excuse me, 6x6. I don't know why I'm saying 2x8, sitting right here on this edge of it. So I'm just going to shorten that line down. I'm going to draw another line from here, straight down, straight over 5.5, straight up. I can leave this blue line here on top of this red line because the blue line prints light medium, this prints extra heavy, so it's not going to have an impact. And then I'll draw another line from here. And how I got it to start here was when I went into the line tool, L enter, I hover over without touching, without clicking, and then I can track to where it would meet. Enter to end the command, enter to get back in the last command I use. Here. And then we do have this green line here. So I do have to go add that green line in. Oh my gosh. I hate when it does that. And it put me back in paper space, so I got to come back to model. So I will go draw another little green line here. And then when it comes to those boards that are sitting across it, there's a 6-inch space and there's 6-inch boards. So if I come here to this, we have 6-inch space and a 6-inch board. So what I would do is I would draw a rectangle that is 5'10.5", because if I started in this corner and I go across to that, I see that it's 5'10.5". And then tab 6, enter, and I would copy this. So I'd click on it, right click, copy, and I would start from the bottom, and then I would go up 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot, 4 foot, 5 foot, 6 foot, and I think there's another one at 7 foot too, right? Would there be one? No, I don't think one fits there. 7 foot? Oh no, there is one right there. And then I would trim. So I would trim these lines out. Like how I said I wasn't going to do the whole thing, and then I just kind of get excited. I get a little carried away. Which actually poopy, because at the very bottom is not where they're supposed to be. So I'm not going to edit this out. I'm going to just delete all of them. I'm going to start anew. Oops. So I'm going to do a rectangle from that bottom corner. I'm going to go over 5'10.5", tab 6, enter. Then I'm going to move this, so M, enter, up 6 inches. And then I'm going to start copying. So I click on it, CO, enter, base point. I'll click on the bottom and I'll bring it up 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot, 4 foot, 5 foot, 6 foot. And then there's a little gap at the top. I knew things looked a little bit off. Trim. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. That. And then I have my east elevation ready to go. So I would save. If you wanted to do the north and the west elevations for extra credit, you can absolutely use, especially like for this method that we use for the east one, where we could take this copy and we can rotate it this way, move it so that it was sitting like over here, and then use raise and our tools to also bring over our heights. You can also make a copy of the south elevation and then highlight it and mirror it. So MI, enter. For our mirror line, it's not going to make a difference too much where we pick it, because I'm just going to mirror it across. And this time I will say, yes, I want to erase the original since I made a copy. And then I would have to gut a lot of this out on my south or on my north elevation, because I'm not going to need a lot of it, but at least then I still have that height and everything tracked to it. And then I could take this, move it so that that very edge is lined up with my edge here, and I could track down for where my door is going to sit, where this window is going to sit, and I could track things like the heights for this porch and everything. So I can start to lay out my north elevation and my west elevation using the same techniques that we used for the south and the east.